Welcome everyone to Tamaquag's series Literature and Culture Author Conversations. We're so happy to have you here this evening to join us in chat dialogue and strategic questions and learning through literature regarding Indigenous culture, history, indigeneity, and the complexities of life. Thank you for joining us for this virtual discussion made possible thanks to funding from the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts, the Rhode Island Council for the Humanities, the New England Foundation for the Arts, USDA Rural Development, and people like you. You too can support programs like this by making a tax-deductible donation to Tamaquag Museum. The link will be in the chat. Just a quick reminder before we get started, please make sure you're all on mute and please engage with us by using the chat box to type your questions or comments and add to the conversation. Periodically, you may notice that our Tamaquag Tech, our intern Haley, is putting questions in the chat for you to respond to. If you like to respond to chat questions, feel free. If you don't, just continue to enjoy the program. We will also take additional live questions at the end of the presentation and conversation. Feel free to use your reaction buttons to let us see your enthusiasm. And if you're having any troubles, feel free to private chat the Tamaquag Tech for assistance. Before we begin, I just want to take a minute to introduce myself and do a land acknowledgement in my language. You can introduce yourself and acknowledge the land you're on. If you know the nation, put it in the chat. If not, you can use the tool native-land.ca, which is a map. It's not perfect, but it can give you some ideas of the Indigenous people that are in your area. Or if you want to create a land acknowledgement for your organization, you can use the Tamaquag Museum Guide to Land Acknowledgements. Askuikwasin, Natasuis Makasini Pashao at Nahai Gansek, Natasuis Loren Spears at Englishat, Ni Nahai Gansek Nehantek, Kanupiam at Aki at Nahai Gansek, Winikisak. So hello everyone, I'm Loren Spears. I'm the Executive Director of Tamaquag Museum. My traditional name is Makasini Pashao, and I am Narragansett Niantic. And I am welcoming you to the homelands of the Narragansett people. I did want to say that we are recording tonight. So if you don't want to be seen, be sure to just keep your screen off. Otherwise, we are recording this and we'll later also post it out on our YouTube page. And with that, I would like to introduce Yvonne Wakim Dennis. I'm hoping our tech is looking, it doesn't seem like our recording is blinking, so I want to make sure it is indeed recording and is not on pause. Okay. So introducing Yvonne Wakim Dennis. To the great surprise of some Americans, most Native people live in urban centers, and Yvonne Wakim Dennis is one of them. She is an award-winning author of several nonfiction books for children and adults. Yvonne interweaves environmental justice and normalizing of Indigenous cultures into all she writes and credits her diverse family, Sandhill Band of the Lenape and Cherokee and Syrian, for piquing her interest in an all-inclusive and multicultural world. She is honored to be a mentor for the Highlights Foundation First Diversity Fellowship, a mentorship program for people of color and Indigenous authors pursuing publication in children's literature. Yvonne has written many books, some of which she's going to share with us tonight. So please join me in welcoming today's guest, Yvonne Wakim Dennis. And you can certainly use your reactions to clap and welcome her today. So hello, Yvonne. It's so nice to see you.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. And I see that two of my cousins are here.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic.
And I just want to urge everyone, when things open up, to make sure to get up there to the Tamaqua Museum, which is quite fabulous. And you're going to get, you're moving into your new building soon. And we're very lucky to, as New Yorkers, to have that resource so close to us.
Thank you. Let's say soon, sort of, because we still have a couple of years before we'll actually get there. But it's
well,
very
considering
exciting.
how long, and also if you weren't the first, one of the first tribally owned museums.
Yes, I think it might be only Tantaquidgeon that's older than us. We're over 60 years old. We were founded in 1958, 62 years old, I believe.
That's quite amazing.
So we're super excited to have you here tonight and to, chat with you about the work that you do. And maybe you can just introduce yourself the way that you'd like to introduce yourself and state the homelands that you're on.
Yes, I want to give great gratitude to the Cayuga people, who are the only federally recognized nation to not have a land base, not have a reservation. And indeed, I'm in Ithaca right now, Ithaca, New York. I'm in Cayuga lands. And I also live in Manhattan, which is Lenape lands. So I'm blessed to live on homelands of two great historical people and contemporary people, and to live next to Cayuga Lake. And I'm grateful that the Cayuga people let me live and pray on their homelands and work on their homelands.
Thank you. That's so wonderful for sharing that sense of place with us. It's so important. And, people are learning more and more about acknowledging the land they're on. And hopefully that's the beginning of really including indigenous people's lifeways, culture, history, and contemporary contributions into the American narrative. And I think that the work that you've done in your lifetime has really showcased that. But let's start first with you sharing a little bit about your background and how you became an author after, a little introduction into who you are.
Well, as you said, I am a blended person of both Native and Arabic ancestry. And as a child growing up, I was always more interested in the stories adults told than those of my peers. And I would listen at every door, phone conversations, however I could get into it. And very often adults were very candid in front of me because I was like the mouse, the fly on the wall. I just wanted to hear it. And I was always writing, and I would often write down the stories that I heard. And of course, looking back now, I think I got a lot of things confused because I didn't have the depth of understanding. But I had it really enriched my life. And I always listened to stories. I especially liked being around elderly people and elders, and especially when they would say something that I didn't expect, like use a bad word or put themselves in a situation that when someone is really elderly, you don't see them as being a kid riding a bike or as a young adult having sexual feelings. You just see them as people who put their teeth in a glass every night. So I think that really, really inspired me. I was always the best writer in my little school, and I won several contests at the county and regional and state level. And I was very shy about it, but that I really felt that that was my bliss. Writing was my bliss. And I have a vivid imagination, which sometimes works against me. So, you know, I can be very busy catastrophizing, which is just the other side of the coin you have to put up with when you have a vivid imagination. But anyway, I went on to college, and of course I wrote for the school newspaper and whatever was around for me to write. I ended up as a professional having to write the newsletters, the funding statements, the proposals, which Loren, you can identify with, is not fun, but I was really, really good at it because I animated everything. And I just got tired of it for so long. But anyway, I was a social worker and an educator for many years, worked with the Native American Ed program, did a lot of writing in curriculum, a lot of curriculum development, and a lot of writing as briefs and protests and legal stuff. And then I got very ill, and I was too sick to really go to work. And one of my dearest friends in the world, who's a writer, she said, "Why don't you help me update this book? I've always loved your writing." And this is a white woman, Arlene Hirschfelder. And for as long as I can remember, publishers would accept a book by a non-Indian before they would accept a book from an Indian regarding Indian issues. And the thought was, and it was told to me once, it was very upsetting, that we as Indigenous people are not objective enough to write our own history. And I think that's because we tell the truth rather than the fantasy. So she really opened the door for me, and I will respect her because a lot of writers of Native materials, non-Native writers, they want to hold their work. They don't want to share. So they're not willing to help a Native person get published. And things are different now with all the years of protesting that we've all done. Now an editor will say, is this an own book? And an own book means, is it written by someone who owns the story? Is it written by someone from the community, from the people it's written about? So things have improved. Still, Indian authors are very much underpublished, and most books about Indian people still come from non-Native people. So it's a battle. Even getting an agent is really difficult.
Yes, it's something that we very much encourage here at Tamaqua to try to get more people writing. So we're always thrilled to spotlight Indigenous authors and their writing. You know, I think it's important to have those contributions and that voice, sharing our stories, but from a first person perspective. And so I'm wondering if you might share your latest book, Native American Landmarks and Festivals, and tell us a little bit about it and what inspired you to do this particular book.
This is the second book. I'm now working on the third book for this publisher, Visible Ink Press. This was the first book. And the publisher contacted me to write this book. I came highly recommended by another publisher, which in the publishing world is like Godiva chocolate. And I said, oh yes, I didn't have work at the time, I'll do it. He wanted me to redo a book that was by Duane Champagne. I don't know if you know that author, who's a wonderful author, but he had done this book and he had invited several people to submit. So the book was not consistent. There wasn't a real formula for it. It was kind of all over the place, and it needed to be updated. So I had used the book before, but I never really read it because it's a reference book. So I sat down and read it, and I said, I can't do this book by myself. It's just too big. So I called him back and I said, I'm willing to work on it, but I have to have a co-author. There's no way I can do this project by myself. Your advance is too low, and it's going to tie me up for 2 years. And I won't be able to work on other projects. So he said, oh, no, I don't like to work with 2 authors. And I said, well, have you ever? He goes, no. I said, well, try it. You'll like it. So anyway, invited Arlene Hirschfelder. And then the 2 of us, when we got on this project, we found that it was just too much. And so another friend who is Ojibwe had ghostwritten a lot of books, but she never had her name on the cover. So I said, hey, Shannon, how would you like to have your name on the cover? So she got on the project and we were able to finish. This is a really big book. And so anyway, in my contract, I said, I don't want to include Canada because it was the Native Americans of North America. Canada is only another part of North America. There are 27 North American countries, and this book was not big enough to include them all. And I'm not going to just say that Canada and the US are North America. Anyway, he agreed. When he called me up, hysterical, he wanted to know where was the section on Canada. And I said, you agreed that we wouldn't put it in. Anyway, so I said, if I put in Canada, let me do it in an appendix, and the rest of the countries in North America, you know, like Puerto Rico, Jamaica, you know, Mexico, which has more natives than any other country in the hemisphere. So he agreed. But anyway, then I get my review copy. And I found the first picture in this book was this one. Christopher Columbus landing in America. I had a heart attack. So the book, which is anything but, came to look like the dead white man's book. You know, even George Bush is in here. He never did anything for Native people. So I had a fit, and I wanted my name off it. I would contacted the Authors Guild, and my publisher, who was very understanding, said, well, what can I do to make it better? We can't take the book out of commission. I said, you can give me another book and let me do what I want. Let me pick the pictures. So he had a travel guide to Native America, and it needed to be updated, and it was written by a non-Native person. And that's how I got to write this book. And I don't know if any of you know, but casinos are always seen as the only way that contemporary people have a way of making a living on reservations. But that's not so. Casinos are part of a travel destination, and there are all kinds of opportunities on Indian nations and in cities with Indian people to have great travel adventures. You know, everything from skydiving to horseback riding to doing a camp and being on the river for a few days to entertainment with these, you know, very well-known, you know, Blake Sheldon and Eddie Murphy, and all these people. You can have a vacation and see the celebrities, as well as learn how to make a dugout canoe. And no longer are Indian people sitting along Route 66 making baskets. Now we have a whole website about Route 66, and we've made it our way. So before, we were always seen as an exotic destination. And it was like a drive-by tourist opportunity. Oh, there are the Indians weaving their little blankets. Now we are controlling what it is we're sharing, and being able to make money from it. So even the national parks now are listening to indigenous people. So that's why I wanted to write this book. So, and the pictures in here are very different. And I met, in all my books, I meet so many wonderful people because I really believe in interviewing. I believe in oral tradition. So I don't get all my information from another book, the library, the internet. I actually go to people, and I find that is as credible as reading what someone else wrote about them.
Yes, indeed. And for those that don't know, Tamaquag Museum is in that book, which is wonderful. What is, I noticed you have a tag in the book. I'm wondering what you were featuring.
I was just talking a little bit. I just wanted to show this picture. I also, pictures mean a lot. This publisher only does black and white, but I don't know if you can see this.
Yes,
family.
we can see it. That's a beautiful family.
Right, they're Seminole family, and this child is a Mensa kid, and so is her little brother. After the book came out, he was also tested. So I wanted to show that on your tours with Native people, you can actually meet children who are Albert Einstein-like kids, you know, and you know, they're a beautiful family. And what I wrote is, the great southeastern region of the United States is peppered with ancient mounds, the engineering feats of long ago peoples through different historical stages. Beaches, mountains, and rivers surround lands where early agronomists invented and raised a variety of crops. Ruins of not so ancient towns and mourned the loss of its citizens, entire nations that were ripped from southern homelands and forced westward less than 200 years ago. From Virginia to Florida, evidence of great civilizations remain, and many are tourist stops. However, the entire region is dynamic, rich with contemporary landmarks, festivals, and events that illustrate the moxie, valor, and courage of First People.
That's beautiful. Very lovely in the way that it's written to engage the reader and make them want to visit and to understand the history. You mentioned oral history, and I want to go to that. I want to understand in the work that you're doing how you express how history of Indigenous people is rooted in oral tradition. And just dig a little deeper on how that impacts your research for your books.
Mm-hmm. Some of the history is written. A lot of people think that no Indians had any way of writing. That's not true. We had, the Cherokee had a written language before, even though he was a wonderful man, but before Sequoyah was born, because the Cherokee people had scribes. Why do you need a scribe if there's nothing to write? So, and the Cherokee people believe that when we took in a group that was forced out of their homelands and driven east, when we took them in, they brought their writing to us. That's where we got it from, you know, thousands of years ago. But anyway, I think that like with more recent history, say 200 years ago, Native people did not trust the dominant culture to chronicle events. So some things were hidden. And I don't know, Loren, I'm sure you've heard it, but if you've ever been to a traditional recounting of an event, the cultural bearer tells the history with every period, comma, quotation mark intact. So there's no paraphrasing. These things are passed down, but people had to learn oratory skills to pass them down. Just not anybody could preserve and continue the historical accounts. People were chosen for a certain ability. So it's much more reliable. Like the Bible, for instance, that was, before that was written down, it was handed down for years and years and years. So we're not quite sure. Whereas in Native oral tradition, people had to learn it the right way and they were tested. And the wampum belts, people who can read those, they'll read with precision every word. I mean, we look at it and it's, oh, isn't that cute? It's a bunch of purple and white beads, but no, that is a book. And so when I'm looking for stories, and it's not just with Native people, it's with indigenous people from all over, like the Basque people, the Sami people, the Onangi people. You know, if you go to them, you're going to hear the truth. You're going to hear stories that they saved from the missionaries, from the archaeologists, from the oppressors. So I think it's quite important. And some things are shocking. And shocking in that when it's again, like looking at elders, do these people really do they really gamble? Do they really have sex? Do they really do all these things? No. And when we find out that people who lived a long time ago were just as animated and real as people today. So I trust a lot of people would go inside. And I mean that when we realized that our way of life was being destroyed, people wanted to, like a time capsule. So some of the people in community became time capsules. They became the keepers of the cultural knowledge, the religious knowledge. So that's why I trust. And also, the dominant culture wasn't that interested in learning a lot about indigenous people. And so a lot of times people were never asked. So when I go and ask, sometimes people are very willing to share. And I also assure them that this is something that writers don't do. I always assure them, you can read it before it's published, which is a big no-no with writers. But I feel that's my obligation and my responsibility for them sharing with me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's important. I think indigenous people feel that they've been misquoted and misrepresented so much that that's a good policy to have. And I certainly appreciate that, having been someone who's been misquoted many a time. So I'm wondering, I know you have a few different books that you might want to share, but I'm wondering if one might, any of the books that you have that you'd like to share, that you'd like to hold up and kind of just tell a little bit about, but maybe share a passage or a page or an image or something that intrigues you. So please.
Well, this was my first children's book. It's called Children of Native America Today. And I did all the writing and my co-author got all the pictures, because it is a picture book. And if you notice how the picture wraps around, and I love the story. This is Rocky, and Rocky's parents, his father's a very famous poet, and they adopted 4 kids on the same day. And I didn't realize this. He's from Meskwaki, and I just kept calling him, like, why aren't you answering your phone? I need this, I need this. And finally came, he says, oh, Yvonne, I'm so sorry. But, you know, because I wanted pictures, he agreed to give me pictures. He said, but we adopted 4 kids on the same day, and we're pretty busy. And he had to travel far to, you know, get to a place where he could send me pictures. So, and then in writing this book, these kids are, I didn't know this, these came from a photo house, and these kids are half Aleut and half Wampanoag. Oh. And, you know, I didn't know that. I just said, oh, that's a pretty picture. Let's use that. And we got photographers in some cases to go out and get pictures for us. But I tried to show what, you know, through the words and through the photographs, we tried to show children. When I say normalize, like, it shouldn't be a big deal that a Native American kid is an award-winning English writer, RIDER. It shouldn't be a big deal that an Indian kid, you know, can play musical instruments, or that Indian kids come in all sizes, shapes, and colors. All of my books, I try to show the diversity among our group. Every other group's allowed to have diversity but us. We're all supposed to look like Tonto. I don't know why. Tonto doesn't. But anyway, and I also include Hawaiians, because even though Native Hawaiians are technically not related to us, they are Native people, and they are under the dominion of the United States. And I'm always surprised when I do research on Native Hawaiians, and it's just remarkable, their contemporary lives as well as their history. And I always include urban people, because most Native people live in cities today.
That's so true.
And also you can see children of all different levels of physical ability. And one of my favorite things from this book is and this was a big fight with the editor. See this picture? What is that kid doing?
Playing golf?
Well, Indians don't play golf.
Yes, they do. We have Nota Begay, right?
Well, they tried to take that picture out, and what I wrote about it, they tried to take it out of the book because Indians don't play golf. And I'm like, hello, that's what I mean, normalizing. Of course we play golf and poker.
Like when my aunt wrote the book Strawberry Thanksgiving, the grandmother drove, and the publisher wanted them to take that out because grandmothers that are indigenous don't drive. And she's like, I'm a grandmother, I drive. I'm a grandmother now and I drive. So it's so silly what they think about indigenous people. So
we're supposed to be static, never moving, always. We're an anachronism, you know, like the image of the Native person on a horse with a breastplate and a pipe and an airplane going over, you know, like, and
well, anyone who has children or who teaches with children or has grandchildren, that is a great book to have to like you said, to normalize and put indigenous people into the 21st century. That's fantastic. We plan on getting that particular book for our gift shop, where we haven't quite gotten our act together because we don't have a coordinator at the moment. So we're working on it. But it's such a, those kinds of books are so important. And, you know, the travel guide and giving people opportunity, people that are traveling around, is such a great way. And the almanac for people that really want to have a wide swath of knowledge about indigeneity in the United States is fantastic. I think you just picked up another one. I want you to share that one next. Oh, I love it. You got the tall chiefs on there.
Yes. Now, I did not pick any of these people on the cover. That's another thing for those of you considering a writing career. Illustrators, top writers. Why? I don't know. We have to change everything that the editor wants to at least fight about it. Anything the author changes is $100. They charge the publisher $100 at least. So, but I just wanted to read you something from this book. And it's the first chapter, Who Are Native People? James ran to catch the bus and jumped on just before the doors closed. It was after 6 p.m. and he had to get home and have dinner before his school friends came over to work on their class history project. He hadn't had time to change from his ribbon shirt into his street clothes. That afternoon, he and other students at the Native American Education Program had posed for pictures in their regalia. James only wore his native clothing on special occasions, like powwows and ceremonies. "Are you an Indian?" an elderly white lady asked, her booming voice echoing throughout the bus. "Yes," James answered in a quiet voice, trying not to draw any more attention to himself. "Why is an Indian riding a bus instead of a horse? Indians aren't supposed to be in New York City. Don't you belong in a teepee on a reservation?" 12-year-old James felt everyone's eyes on him. He wasn't sure what to do. His family taught him to be respectful to elders, but what if they were disrespecting him? Finally, James answered in a firm but polite voice. "Indian people live everywhere in this country. After all, it is our country. And I live in an apartment building like other New Yorkers. In fact, my people never lived in teepees. There are all kinds of Native people and we are all different. But today, more Indians live in cities than on reservations." People began to cheer at his response to the rude woman. But this just embarrassed James even more. He was relieved when the bus reached his stop and he could get off. So that's a compilation of something that happened to my son and me. But that was my segue into stereotypes. So anytime you're dealing with children, you have to start with stereotypes because it's so ingrained. For instance, when this book was honored at the Kennedy Museum International Book Fair, and I had one of my former students read, and she's reading from this book, showing the pictures. It was a big group auditorium, like 300 people. And afterwards, it was my turn to, open to answer questions. And they wanted to know, where did I leave my horse when I came into DC? When did I learn English? How was it in the teepee? Did my clothes smell like smoke? I mean, on and on and on after they were just read this. So we have to do double duty. We can't just tell our story. We have to do the pre-story. So
can you hold up that book so that people can see the title, the one that you have in your hand?
It's an activity book.
And it's called A Kid's Guide
to Native American History, more than 50 activities. And every activity in this book I had to do, but I worked for many years at the Native American Education Program, so I was used to, doing many projects. And so anyway, so we gave information that was current as well as history, but we had to try to unwind the myths that people have about us, and especially children. And their teachers learned the same. It's sad because my son went to a school that's touted as the best school for giftedness in the country, and he learned the same thing about Native people that I did 30 years before. And they had me as a resource, and my teachers didn't have anybody.
Right.
They used to ask me to get up. I'm this little child, and they want to know, oh, Yvonne, tell us about the Indians. I'm like, what?
It's so true. Every Native child's put on the spot to be the educator for their teacher and for their classmates. But I'm so happy that you have all these wonderful resources that teachers and families can start to use, and just individuals to educate themselves. I'm thinking about, we've been in this time where we're really having lots of conversations, even though education hasn't changed as quickly as we want it to. We're kind of in this moment where people are talking about monuments and land back and protests. And of course, there's been action at the Capitol, and missing and murdered Indigenous women, and all kinds of other social justice issues. I'm wondering about how your work speaks to these pressing issues.
That's why I try to interview as many people and try to know as much as possible. For instance, do y'all know about the Sand Creek Massacre? Okay, so the descendants of those massacred have been trying for years to get a statue erected, and the statue is by, this name just went out of my head, and I just wrote about this. My newest book coming out is Indigenous First, but he did the first veterans, Native veterans monument statuary in DC. But he designed, okay, so the Native people in Colorado were trying to get this statue erected to so that when you approach the Capitol building, it'll be on the west, which apparently is the most visible part of the Capitol steps. But there was a Union soldier, a statue of a Union soldier there, and the state absolutely refused to move it. Well, during the recent protests, the statue got toppled and graffitied. So just a couple of months ago, the state allowed the Native people to put up the statue of this weeping woman, and she's cut her braids because her children have been murdered and her parents. And it's in the exact spot that people wanted. And I decided not to tell the backstory with that because it would have taken up a lot of space that I needed to show other public works. But I wanted to kind of congratulate the state committee for doing the right thing and not beat them up anymore, which is very hard for me to do. But anyway, so that popped up. And I'm studying murals now as first. And Duluth, Minnesota, which is one, there are a lot of man camps around there because of the oil industry. And that's where a lot of Native women and children, even babies, have been sold into the sex trafficking trade and disappeared. So 3 street artists did this beautiful mural of a woman. And that's the first time in Duluth that there, even though it has a large Native population, that there's been any public work of that stature that it's the whole huge side of a building. It's massive. And these things are popping up. So there's a non-native doctor on the Navajo reservation. He is, he's an African-American doctor who's been there for years. He started this project where he brings in street artists, many of them native, to pretty up some of these blighted spots on the reservation. And just recently, about 7 different native muralists, or they're sometimes called street artists, took an abandoned, this doctor arranged for them to decorate an abandoned motel where people, you know, who are homeless sometimes stay, or people hitchhiking or backpacking. And it's quite beautiful. So these artists turned blight into beauty, and these things are popping up. And I just got a call from a friend who's a muralist in New York City, and he just got a grant to do 2 indigenous murals in New York. I was so excited.
So Debbie Moorhead, who I think is Seekonk Wampanoag, she did a set of murals in Providence, one of which is in Onlyville. The other one, I don't know exactly the location, but one reflects on the water systems, and one shows the history over time, 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, I think maybe even 1900s. And so that's really good. I can probably give you more information or connect you to her.
Oh yes, if it's a first, I want.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're aware of the We Are Still Here mural. It's done by an international street artist who's non-native, but partnered with Tamaquag Museum, and it's representing a millennial who is an artist herself, Narragansett Lindsay Wamsukatan, and she's holding a photograph of Princess Red Wing, who of course, you know, was born in the late 1800s. So it's kind of spanning, you know, the 1800s, 1900s, and the 2000s, which is really unique, and telling a wonderful story. So there's some interesting things happening in Rhode Island. And I think the big mural, the one by Gaia, might be the first Native American mural in the city. And then I think Debbie Moorhead did hers like last year, or maybe it was the year before. With COVID, it's kind of, the year kind of blurs away, but you get the idea. So that's really great.
She was the first Native artist to do a mural in Providence.
She may be. She may be.
That's the kind of, that's what I'm looking for. See?
Yeah.
I talk to you and I find out. I can't find
she may be. I don't know of others that have done a mural out, you know, in the city like that. Debbie Moorhead did the mural with the kids here at Nuitwan School. That's in the museum as well. She was the lead artist guiding the students. So, you know, these are amazing stories of impact, and to have those stories captured in a book helps other people understand, one, that Native artists are, you know, vibrant and viable and are telling our stories, and in a visual format, which is really remarkable. So this is great. I look forward to seeing that particular book. Yes. I wanted to share one more thing that to the audience and to you, that we're actually working on an Indigenous monument for the Rhode Island Veterans Cemetery in Rhode Island, you know, because Indigenous people have the highest number per capita of service in the armed forces. And a gentleman who's Indigenous, he works there. He started working there maybe 2 or 3 years ago and realized there was no monument to Indigenous veterans. And to date, he's counted, I don't know, it was like maybe 130 or more Indigenous people that are buried there. And more will be uncovered as people, you know, realize that this project is going on. If they didn't happen to say, the documents don't request it. So sometimes people don't say Native American on their forms, but yet they are, because we found relatives of ours that didn't say it. and nonetheless, that's, so we're working on that project. We're hoping in the next year to fundraise. We're just trying to finalize the details so that people will have a good way in which to donate to that project.
That's great. See, that can be in my book, because it's a first. And even though the monument's not built yet, it's the first attention that was drawn. And well, I'll talk to you later.
And we have a rendering of it, of what we want it to look like and such too. So it's
but that's great. And in this book, I have like the first Native American plus size drag queen to win a contest.
Well, there might be something. I think Sharente won a special honor and might be a first on two-spiritedness, and I can't remember the name of the honor, but anyway, we can cycle back to that. So maybe we have another conversation later. I don't want to get too off track, but that just triggered in my head about first. So
well, this is going to be the last big book I do. So I mean, that's what I'm thinking. So I want to make sure that it has everything in, because everybody knows about, and if they shouldn't, they should know about the Wilma Man killers and the Thorpes, and they're wonderful. And I'm not putting them down, but I like to celebrate like hometown heroes too, like the Native woman who said, wait, my kid has 10 study halls a day and no classes, and organizes the community and makes the first Native American education program in that town.
Yes.
Those are things that people live right next door to you, or the cemetery worker who stops one day and says, wait a minute, all these are all my relatives. These are people from my nation are dead, and there's no indication, there's nothing honoring them, because it takes someone to be the first. It's not always a comfortable place to be, but I like to celebrate that.
Well, you did a great job answering questions that I didn't ask, which was around the future goals. So that's really great that book is on the horizon, and we're going to look forward to that. And I'm definitely going to be sure to offline share some other firsts. I know we had a conversation, but my mind is triggering again now.
Yes, and I have 2 more months, so get to me.
Yes, and I wanted to make sure that we share with the audience how they can learn more about your work. And our tech will put in is it CamilleSeaman.com and YvonneDennis.com, and then even Amazon for the Native American Almanac history.
Camille was something I sent to you because that's a Shinnecock woman.
That's a different one. I don't know how that got.
Yes, she was the first Shinnecock woman to win this National Geographic photography.
Oh, yes. I remember that got tangled into this. So
she lives in Ireland, and she photographs the effects of climate change on the Arctic, and she uses portraiture.
I remember that now. So hopefully Haley will get from Yvonne Dennis down to how you can follow you on Twitter at Yvonne Dennis as well.
I always forget about Twitter, but my website is YvonneDennis.com. And I sent, she put it up there. Thank you, Miss Techie person.
So that's great. That's phenomenal. So I want to make sure that we have enough time for the audience. If they have a couple of questions for us, I will take a peek at the chat and make sure we haven't missed any along the way, because we've been doing such a great job of chatting, and and that'll be great. Let's see. Well, we've got lots of nice comments about that they want to get your book and things like that. So let's see. Others are saying Wadu for this. You did a great job. It's phenomenal. And I'm just so excited to share your books and just have that many more quality resources for families and educators and just people in general. So the other thing that that was a question a little earlier was what are you reading now? Because people are always curious as to what authors are reading.
Well, I was ready for that because I read all the time. In fact, Joe Bruchac, one of the people I've written about in several of my books, he said that to be a good writer, you have to be a great reader. And he said he's a terrible writer, but he's a wonderful rewriter. So you get it down and then you go back and fix it. So I read. I cannot go to sleep unless I read, and I usually read a few things at once. So I just finished The Future Home of the Living God by, do you know the book, by Louise Erdrich? Was not the book to read during a pandemic, but you know, I really like her writing. I love Walter Mosley. Do any of you know him? He's an African-American mystery writer, and I just read Trouble Is What I Do. The Library of Lost and Found, which is by a British writer, Phaedra Prickett. And Read to the Bone, which is a YA book by Jacqueline Woodson. I don't know if you know her. She wrote Brown Girl Dreaming. She's a wonderful writer. And so that's what I've read this week. I finished them all over the past week. And today, this is what I'm reading, because I am also, you know, half Arab, and I'm on the Children's Book Committee of the Arab American National Museum. We have to select a book. So this, I have all these books that I have to read. I'm going to do this. Some of the picture books are fine, but I have about 8 YA books that I have to read. So that's what I'm reading now.
Those are all amazing things. For those that might not be aware, Tamaquag is doing a book club. So we've been doing the author conversation, which is a little different. In the book club, you get to read and just chat about the books. So if people aren't aware, we're doing that on Tuesday evenings with Silver Moon. It's a little late for those of you that might be early birds like me to going to bed because it starts at 8 o'clock because Silver Moon has young children, and her and the group decided 8 o'clock worked for them because they could put kids to bed and then have an hour or so with the grownups. And so they're actually reading Running Water with Thomas King, Nightland with Lewis Owens, which is a novel, and Gardens in the Dune by Leslie Marmon Silko. So these are happening each week. There's a schedule. It starts, we're right in time. The first one is starting on April 20th, and they're discussing the whole book for Nightland. But then there's Greengrass Running Water by Thomas King, and they've got 4 weeks for that. And then
he's one of my, I've read all those, but Thomas King is one of my favorite authors in the whole world.
So if you want to jump on and chat about books, people love it. So feel free. Those are free programs from Tamaquag Museum. So that's great. Another opportunity to explore Indigenous authored books. Is there anything else you wanted to share, Yvonne?
Just that in my books, you know, along with oral tradition, I also use native voice. And the way I do it is to get quotes like, you know, Gabby, oh, I'm having an elder, today's my birthday. So I'm officially older, so I have a right to be forgetful. Anyway, Gabby, what's her name? She's from down there where Juana and Mia live, Piscataway. I know you know her. Anyway, I called her up and because we've had discussions over the years about certain things, and I said, can you give me a quote about Native people living in cities that will really say what I'm trying to say in this book? And she did. And I think that's very important. So I use Native voice, and it's a way to use something and not have copyright issues, because the person, said it. But that's important to me, because I feel sometimes that I don't have the right. One of the reasons I don't like to write history, and I always seem to end up doing it, is because the people you're writing about aren't around to defend themselves. And it is such a responsibility, because you can't call them up and let them read what you wrote, And it's just very, very uncomfortable. So by using quotes, it allows me to get the different voices in. It's not just, my voice. Gabby Tayak.
Oh, yes, yes, I do know who that is.
Yes, of course you do. She wrote, Native people have been urban people throughout history. Look at Cahokia and Tecnoclin. I can never say that word. We are also free people and have the right to move across this turtle island anywhere we want to or need to. And we can keep our connections to our homeland communities or make a new community. Cities are still part of this Mother Earth after all, even if most people forget that fact. And
that's perfect.
Meant everything to me to start the chapter on urban people.
So I did notice in the chat, there's first off, quite a few happy birthdays to you.
Oh, thank you. My birthday present from my neighbors.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And from friends and
lovely. And you get to, and you spend the evening with us. How sweet. Winiki Naki Suk, happy birthday. But there's also a question from Mia that asks, which of your books did you enjoy writing the most?
I enjoyed writing them, but I did not enjoy working with the editors in many of them. But I guess I have to say this book.
And why?
Because no one had ever done a book like this before. And it was just on contemporary people. I love contemporary things, and even getting an agent is hard for me because they want me to write history. Yes, I write history because I'm forced to, but I want to do fiction too. I want to do contemporary things too. But this book was all on Native people and current issues. And so I just felt free, where, the other books, again, it's, I consider myself a creative chronicler, chronicling something that's already happened in a creative way. This book, things happen, but I got to, the book was how I wanted it to be.
Mm-hmm. Your own control, your own voice, yeah. It's important.
And then when we finished it and sent it in, on a Sunday, I got this big package thinking it was the galleys when they still sent the galleys. And it was, our press was Fulcrum, and our editor was on vacation. So they had a meeting. I'm sorry, I turned that phone off. They had a meeting, and a teacher was on that committee, and she said, you shouldn't do that book because teachers don't want to know anything about contemporary Indians. They only want to know about ancient people. So they said, you can keep the advance, we don't want the book. The editor came back, finds us out, was so upset that she found us another publisher and she quit. And wow. So that's, I mean, we don't like the cover, but that's my sister, my niece and nephew, my friends, my former students. But the point is, that's the attitude. You're only good if you're still only a good Indian if you're a dead Indian.
Exactly. Well, I look forward to sharing that resource guide with teachers for them to have that perspective. It's really important for educators to understand that we're still here and we're urban Indians, we're rural Indians, we're in town Indians, we're indigenous people that are living in all walks of life and contributing to this country in a myriad of ways. So I thank you so much for giving resources for families focused on children, focused on curriculum, focused on history, focused on the contemporary, the urban. It's really like, I mean, what a wealth of resources, including looking at monuments and, you know, tourism places that people can go to learn more about indigenous people today. I mean, it's such a wide range of types of books. It's just remarkable. And I definitely look forward to your next one coming out.
Thank
and
you.
And we'll be sure to share it as it comes to pass. So you'll make sure you communicate with us. I hope the audience will join me in congratulating and thanking Yvonne again for sharing with us today. And I certainly thank all of you for joining us for this author conversation. I have just a couple of announcements before you go.
Thank you so much, Loren.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's just been phenomenal. Our next literature and author conversation is scheduled with Brown professor Patricia Rubitone, who's sharing her new book, Native Providence, which actually features that mural I mentioned on the cover of the book. She got permission from the artist to use that as the cover of her book, talking about urban Indians, as you were just saying, Native Providence, you know, over time. So that'll be on May 5th, coming right up in a few weeks. I already mentioned the book club, so you can join that. Our tech will put in the chat our TamaquagMuseum.org events, and that way you can follow up on any of the events that are coming up. I know we're putting up our June events we have actually 2 authors, Lisa Brooks, who wrote Our Beloved Kin, which is focused on King Philip's War and particular stories of Weedamoo and Pritchard, I think is the name. My brain just went on a fog as well on names, but nonetheless, really distinct stories about that history. And then Christine DeLucia, who wrote Memory Lands, which is also about King Philip's War, but from a different viewpoint and slant. So really excellent authors coming up to listen to. I want to thank our funders again, because without them over this COVID year, we wouldn't be able to do all the things that we're doing. The Rhode Island Council on the Arts, the Rhode Island Council for the Humanities, USDA Rural Development, and the New England Foundation for the Arts, and of course, our generous donors. Holidays are coming up like Mother's Day, birthdays. I should be sending you something from this lovely gift shop, and other holidays. Our online store supports over 35 local Native authors and artists, and feel free to check us out on our online store link at TamaquagMuseum.org/store, I believe. So thank you so much again for joining us today. Thank you, Yvonne, for sharing your stories and your insights into being published, as well as your vast representation of Native culture and histories and stories and contributions. It's just fabulous. So I want to thank you so much for sharing all of those things with us this evening. And again, Wuniniki Naki Suk, happy birthday. And hopefully you can enjoy the rest of this evening with your family. Wuni Nakan, everyone, good night. Have a wonderful night. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Donada.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.